Lucas's angry words hit me like a slap. How dare the maid skimp on cooking? He yelled, his voice full of anger. The word maid made my heart sink. It had been 2 years since Lucas and I got married, and I started wondering if he'd seen me as just a maid all this time. Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't the yelling that got to me, it was the frustration and sadness that brought tears to my eyes. You think crying will get you off the hook? Lucas's sharp voice followed, and then something was thrown at me. Even through my teary eyes, I knew it was dangerous. Instinctively, I crouched down. Something flew over my head and crashed against the wall with a loud sound. Cautiously, I looked up to see what it was. A beer bottle. What if it had hit me? A deep fear set in, and I realized I couldn't take it anymore. I needed more than just to leave. I needed retribution. He had to understand the pain and humiliation he'd put me through. As I stood up, resolved, I heard footsteps behind me. My name is Lily Brown, a 29-year-old housewife. It's been 2 years since I married Lucas, but we haven't been blessed with children yet. Instead, about 6 months ago, we started living with my father-in-law, Henry. Last March, his wife passed away, leaving him alone, and we couldn't leave Dad by himself. After discussing it, we invited him to stay with us. We're in an apartment now, but we plan to buy a new house next spring. Lucas's income is decent, and we're living comfortably. I have to appear happy, otherwise Lucas wouldn't be satisfied. You really are frail, aren't you? Lucas said, more in disbelief than concern, as I managed to sit up in bed. I'm sorry, I mumbled. It's okay. I'll take out the trash for you, he replied, leaving the room. Lucas helps with housework sometimes, like today, when I'm not feeling well. He'll step in, but he just doesn't get the essence of household chores. He carelessly puts out the wrong kind of trash on Burnable Trash Day and doesn't even think about sorting it. When he brings in the laundry, he just throws it in the room without folding it. He only does the visible chores, which is why in our neighborhood, Lucas is known as the ideal husband. You're lucky, Iris. With Lucas's good income, you don't have to work, and he even helps with the chores, my neighbors would say. I couldn't tell them the truth. I just smiled strangely. It's true that Lucas's income isn't low, and thanks to that, I don't have to work. But he only gives me a portion of his salary. Manage this month's expenses with this, he said, and at first, I was puzzled. It was just barely enough. I thought about getting a job, but Lucas dismissed the idea with annoyance. We might run short this month, I argued. I'll keep up with the chores. But Lucas never agreed. At first, I thought he was concerned about my health. But then I realized it wasn't the case. Once, he said, if you work, it'll look like my income is low. You enjoy ruining my reputation, don't you? I hung my head and realized Lucas didn't want me to work to maintain his reputation. He even told the neighbors. She's frail, so I have to help her out. She can't manage the household chores alone, let alone work. The neighbors praised Lucas, while they thought less of me. Your husband's struggling. You should bear with it a bit more, right? They'd say whenever I showed a hint of weakness. Lucas wasn't lying. He was just exaggerating the truth, so I couldn't argue back. I could only force a bitter, self-deprecating smile. And yet, Lucas couldn't manage the household chores perfectly. He mixed up the trash again. Late at night, I would sneak out to the trash area to check. I could see the misplaced trash without even opening the bags. I'd take it back home and put out the correct trash on the right day, sighing in relief. The next day, Lucas would wake up with a smug look on his face. See? Because I'm helping with the chores, you have it easy, right? Yeah, thanks, I would say, forcing a smile. I couldn't tell him the truth. It would hurt his pride. As Lucas happily ate breakfast, I brought up his father. About your father, What about him? Lucas replied. His legs are getting weaker, and he's having trouble with the stairs in our apartment. Maybe it's better if he goes to a facility. Lucas's smile faded. He's my dad. What do you think of him? I think he's a respectable man who worked until retirement, holding important positions. That's why I want him to enjoy his retirement. So you want to dump him in a facility? Speak your mind. You just don't want to take care of him, right? That's not. I was about to deny it when my father-in-law walked in, leaning on his cane. I quickly stood up to help him. Good morning, I greeted him. Good morning, he replied. I quickly stood up to help him. Good morning, I greeted him. Good morning, he replied. Dad, Lucas began proudly, she wants to put you in a facility because she doesn't want to take care of you. That's not what I meant, I protested. My father-in-law sighed. A facility, huh? Might be a good idea at my age. Stairs and steps are tough. Dad, don't say that. Lucas pleaded. He'd been using his care for his father as a way to appeal to the neighbors, taking on visible tasks like hospital visits and walks. But at home he barely paid attention to him. Even now, Lucas remained seated next to me. We'll buy a house and live together, he said. We'll make sure it's barrier-free. Lucas laughed like a dutiful son, but his father's expression was anything but pleased. He saw through the act, knowing Lucas's concern was just for show. My father-in-law sighed after Lucas left for work, saying, Lucas always liked to play the part of the top student, huh? He used his friends as stepping stones to stand out. I never thought he'd still be like that at this age. I forced a smile, more to convince myself than to address my father-in-law. He's trying to help us in his own way, I said. I'm sorry, Iris, my father-in-law murmured, looking down. Right after we got married, Lucas suggested we save up for a new house. I agree without much thought, but now I regret it. Please, we really need more money for this month. Can I have a bit more for the expenses? I asked. Lucas responded coldly. It's money we need for our dream, not a penny can go to waste. I tried to explain that food and utilities were necessary, but Lucas declared, that's because you're being too lenient. Think harder. There must be something you can cut back on. I was at a loss. I was already wearing old clothes and only getting haircuts twice a year. Even with groceries, I bought discounted items and used beans to bulk up meals. There was no luxury in our life except maybe for Lucas's nightly beer and snacks. What about Lucas's drinks and snacks? I suggested. That's me rewarding myself for working hard, he replied. I nodded, realizing I never had a moment to reward myself. I'd love a simple dessert like pudding, but there's no money for such luxuries in the budget Lucas gives me. Managing the finances is your job. Do your best. Yeah, I'll try, I responded, even though I thought I was already doing my best. I couldn't say that out loud. He wouldn't listen. Lucas was saving for our dream of a new house, and I was determined to support that dream, no matter the cost. I'm going to take a bath. Can you get my change of clothes ready? Lucas asked. Got it, I replied, taking his jacket from him. As I did, a realization struck me. Lucas's jacket smelled of perfume. He doesn't wear perfume, so why? Iris, what's wrong? He asked. Nothing, I replied with a forced smile, trying to cover up my inner turmoil. I was near panic. Why would Lucas's jacket have the scent of perfume on it? Had someone been close to him? A woman. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone wearing perfume had been near him on a crowded train. But the more I thought about it, the more my suspicions grew. Could Lucas be cheating? Despite Lucas working hard every day, doubting him felt terrible. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I thought about confiding in my father-in-law, but decided against it. He already lamented Lucas's true nature. I didn't want to trouble him further. This was something I had to bear alone. A few days later, in desperation, I contacted a private investigator. I hoped to prove Lucas's innocence, but I requested an infidelity investigation anyway. The results came quickly. I hesitated to open the envelope, struggling with my decision. Finally, I pulled out the documents. "No way," I whispered, speechless. There were photos of Lucas looking intimate with a young woman. Photos capturing their intimate moments were enclosed. Lucas had been visiting the construction site of our new house with his mistress. What was he thinking? As I read further into the investigation results, I found out that most of the money Lucas claimed he was saving was actually being spent on his mistress. He made me live like this, yet he was with her. A wave of emotions surged from the pit of my stomach, a mix of sadness and anger. I couldn't bear it anymore. I decided that when Lucas came home, I'd confront him with the truth. But it felt pointless. What would confronting him achieve? Lucas would surely be furious. He'd probably never admit to anything. What would I do then? I didn't want to break up. Despite his betrayal, I still couldn't bring myself to hate Lucas. I loved him, which was why I married him. But what about him? Does he still love me? I didn't know, but I didn't want to break up. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen anything and continue living with Lucas in our new house, with my father-in-law, and maybe eventually have children. I dreamed of such a life, but my thoughts crumbled with my tears. This can't be true. This can't be happening. I felt nauseous as I cried. I locked myself in the bathroom, but the nausea wouldn't go away. After taking some medicine, I barely made it to my bed. It was already evening when I checked the clock. I had to prepare dinner, but I couldn't move. Lucas would be home soon. What should I do? In desperation, I made a decision. "I'm sorry, I'm feeling sick today. I couldn't cook, so can you make do with this?" I said as Lucas came home, observing his reaction. The dinner table was laid with frozen, ready-made dishes, mostly things I had stocked up for my lunches, like pasta and hamburgers. They must have been Lucas's favorites, but he glared at me furiously. "Don't mess with me," Lucas said in a low, grumbling voice. "What do you mean by a maid skipping cooking?" he shouted. His loud, angry voice made me cower. Tears streamed from my eyes, not out of fear but frustration. Maid. So that's how Lucas saw me, not as his wife but just as a working maid. "You think crying will get you off the hook?" he shouted sharply, grabbing something and throwing it. I instinctively crouched down as I heard the crash of breaking glass. Turning around, I saw a beer bottle had hit the wall and shattered, its contents slowly staining the floor. I suddenly thought, I've had enough. I can't stay with Lucas anymore. But just leaving wasn't enough. Lucas had called me a maid, so I had the right to ask for compensation in the name of retribution. Just as I was about to stand up, I heard footsteps behind me. What's all this noise? It was my father-in-law. "It's none of your business, Dad," Lucas said dismissively. But my father-in-law saw the shattered beer bottle and seemed to understand everything. His face turned as fierce as his son's, his usual gentleness gone. "You raised your hand against your own wife. What are you doing?" "I had no choice," Lucas said weakly, hanging his head like a scolded child. He cast his eyes around, turning to me as if expecting help, but I had no obligation to offer any. "Enough," my father-in-law said, crossing his arms and watching Lucas. Lucas seemed to realize that throwing the beer bottle was a mistake. If it had hit me, he could have been arrested on the spot. "Iris, thank you for everything, but I can't let my son treat you this way anymore. Could you please leave him?" "Dad, I was planning to do that," I replied, showing my respect with a salute. "Thank you for everything until now, father-in-law." "Hey, Iris, your maid is quitting today," I said formally, then stepped into the hallway. I began to pack my belongings from our shared room. "Goodbye, goodbye," I repeated to myself. With each repetition, the last of my love and attachment to Lucas faded. This was right. I had come to see Lucas as less than a stranger, leaving behind numerous humiliations he had caused me. What will I do now? I muttered. Just then, Lucas entered the room flustered. Hey Iris, you're not seriously leaving, are you? I am. I'll file for divorce. Don't take what my father said seriously. You're not feeling well, right? Just rest. So I would be failing as a maid, right? My voice was cold. You're upset about the maid comment. Upset or not, I said, continuing to pack. That's your true feeling. Well, yeah, but a wife and a maid are similar, right? Both handle household chores and support someone who works outside, right? I paused and glanced at Lucas. You're looking down on all housewives, not just me. Why would you think that? Lucas yelled like a child. Iris, tell my father we're not breaking up. I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm serious about leaving you. Lucas was speechless. I resumed packing. Lucas, my father-in-law called out, "Come back here. We need to talk. Give me a break," Lucas said, reluctantly leaving the room. I sighed. I'll go back to my parents' house for now, I concluded and left the apartment. My sudden return caused a stir at home. This is terrible, my mother frowned after hearing the story. My father even wanted to contact Lucas, perhaps to yell at him, but I stopped him. I never wanted to hear Lucas's voice again. What will you do now? I don't know. I had no savings as life had always been a struggle. The only money I had was a little left from my days as a single office worker. But I won't trouble you and Mom. I'll find an apartment and move out. Stay here, my father said, almost pleading. Dad, as a man, I'm ashamed my own daughter is going through this. I can't let you live alone with all these worries. You're exaggerating. I laughed, but my father's face was serious. Stay for us, Iris. Okay. I agreed, my smile fading as tears started to roll down my cheeks. My mother hugged me, and I cried out loud, clinging to her. The next day, I filed for divorce. After mailing the papers to Lucas, I felt a sense of relief. Lucas called soon after, but I didn't answer. A few days later, my father-in-law called. His voice was a mix of concern and uncertainty. I'm sorry for my son's actions. No, it's okay. I was grateful to have seen his true nature early on, I answered honestly. In the past, I might not have blamed Lucas for his questionable behavior. I convinced myself he was just tired or found some other reason, turning a blind eye to the truth. Lucas doesn't want a divorce, but don't worry. I'll take responsibility and free you from my son. Thank you, I said, putting my hand on my chest, though we were talking on the phone. I have a proposal. What is it? I'm thinking of leaving Lucas. I plan to find a facility and move in. That's so sudden. It's something I've been considering for a while. His voice grew somber. Understandably, his son's misdeeds were the cause, yet he hadn't forgotten his original purpose for calling. The reason my son hasn't let me go is the pension and above all the inheritance, right? Yes, his voice was heavy. Lucas won't leave me because he wants to ensure he inherits my estate. You must have heard something from him. Yes, Lucas often mentioned it, he said. Once the inheritance comes through, paying off the house loan will be a breeze. Lucas had sworn me to secrecy, but it didn't matter now. After all, he had squandered our savings on his mistress. The funds for the new house must be insufficient. How would he cover that? He was counting on his father's inheritance. I'm thinking of writing a will. Please don't talk about such grim things. No, I have no intention of leaving any money to Lucas. But Iris, he hesitated briefly, I want to repay you. I'm thinking of leaving my estate to you. What are you saying? I raised my voice. It was natural for family to take care of each other, yet he was thanking me. Perhaps it included compensation for the humiliation I suffered from Lucas. He wanted to convey that, which was why he had called. But I couldn't accept it. Please stop. I can't accept it. I don't even want to think about what happens after you're gone. I have cancer. What? I almost dropped my smartphone. You're joking, right? It seems Lucas hasn't told you about my hospital visits. I thought it was just rehabilitation for your legs. I shuddered at the horror. Lucas was aiming for his father's inheritance. I had thought it was an unrealistic notion. His father was still in his 60s, weakened but seemingly healthy. But the reality was different. Lucas was expecting his father's imminent departure and the inheritance to fall into his lap. Would anyone honestly want to leave an inheritance to such a son? If that's the case, the pieces of the story started to fit together in my mind. My father-in-law was furious, quietly but surely. He had been waiting for an opportunity to retaliate against his son, and now he had found an ally in me. I understand. I'll follow your wishes, father-in-law. Iris, but in return, could you help me with something? What is it? I want to give Lucas and his mistress a taste of their own medicine, I said honestly. My father-in-law had opened up to me, so now it was my turn to be candid. Lucas plans to move in with his mistress into the new house after the divorce. That foolish son, he muttered. But before that, I'm going to make sure he breaks up with her. I had a plan, and with my father-in-law's support, there could be nothing more reassuring. 3 days later, Lucas called me furiously. Iris, what did you tell my father? What do you mean? I feigned ignorance even though I knew exactly what he was talking about. My father is going to disinherit me. If that happens, all his money won't go to you, I said calmly. Lucas's voice became frantic. Not just that, he met with Catherine, my girlfriend, and persuaded her to break up with me. He told her about how I threw a beer bottle at you and called you a maid. But all of that is true, right? I thought to myself that Lucas had it coming. He looked down on women. Once his true nature was revealed, any woman would leave him, especially someone who extracted money from him like water. I couldn't believe she loved Lucas for who he was, but rather was attracted to his financial appeal. Catherine said she didn't think I was that kind of person. But you are that kind of person. What's your problem? Lucas lashed out, but I didn't care. I was the one who had informed my father-in-law about the mistress. You're bold, Lucas. Choosing a mistress from the same apartment complex. I was utterly dismayed. It was a clear sign of how little he regarded me. But if it weren't so, my father-in-law with his bad legs wouldn't have been able to meet the mistress. You're the one who instigated my father. Why would you think that? Ignoring my question, Lucas continued angrily. This is roundabout. If you wanted me to break up with Catherine, you could have told me directly. Instead, you embarrassed me by having my own father expose my shame. That would have a bigger impact on you, I replied calmly. There was no winner's satisfaction. There was only emptiness. You knew and sent my father to humiliate me further. Even if that's true, what of it? You're disowned by your father. The inheritance you relied on won't come. Give up on the new house, I said, ready to end the call. Lucas had nothing left. His mistress had left him, and his dream of a new home had vanished. Wait, what now? Is that all? What do you mean? I was genuinely perplexed. The recipient of my father's inheritance. It's you, right? Quite the turnaround from a maid to this. You still think of me as a maid. Of course, he retorted, trying his best to hurt me. He was miserable and wanted to drag me down with him. Such spiteful thinking must have been at play. It was just as I thought. Lucas, you're really predictable. But thanks to that, you've helped me. I've recorded this conversation. I'll use it when I demand alimony from you. What? He exclaimed in shock. Don't joke around. The more you talk, the worse it gets for you. That's the kind of person you are. Damn it. Lucas sounded utterly frustrated. Alimony after taking the inheritance. You still want to bleed me dry? Yes, I wouldn't be satisfied otherwise. To be honest, the money didn't matter. All I wanted was an apology from him. It should have been enough. You greedy woman, he finally said in a fit of sour grapes, ending the call. I sighed. He still doesn't understand how wrong he was, muttering to myself. I spread out the documents on the table, evidence of Lucas's infidelity, copies of a diary I kept detailing the cruel actions Lucas had continuously taken against me. I gathered these and sent them anonymously to the company where Lucas worked. Then I found out what happened to Lucas from a desperate call he made to me. Just stop it. My reputation is in tatters. I can't stay at my job, and I'm being ignored by the neighbors. But it's all true. If you won't admit it, let others judge. That's what I thought, and they judged Lucas as the bad guy. Still, he continued to defend himself. Now I'm unemployed, and you want alimony. I can't pay that. Really? But you had that savings, I reminded him. He seemed taken aback. I spent all that money on Catherine. I don't have a penny left. That's pathetic. Catherine, too, had left him after all his devotion. I wonder what Lucas, who can't cook for himself, looks like now. Now unemployed, Lucas must be in a pitiful state, holed up in his apartment. Once his food runs out, he'll have to go outside, and when he does, he'll face the cold stares of the neighbors all at once. Come back to me. Why would I? If you come back, it'll clear up the misunderstandings the neighbors have about me. Misunderstandings. That's right. It's all your delusion. His tone softened. You were weak and couldn't work or manage household chores properly. I was supporting you, Iris. I felt a cold wind blow through my mind as I spoke. That's how you treat me. As weak and trying to owe me a favor. I don't want to owe you a favor. I won't be fooled again. No matter what you say, you can't undo those words. I was referring to the day he called me a maid. Our relationship as husband and wife had ended then. It could never go back to how it was. Goodbye, Lucas. Iris, wait. Lucas's desperate shout echoed in my ears. I frowned and ended the call. My father-in-law contacted me. The facility you recommended is great. I'm glad. He had achieved his dream of barrier-free living. I don't have long left. I just want to live comfortably. I informed my father-in-law that I would visit him soon. Lucas tried contacting me several times, but I ignored him. Eventually, it became bothersome, so I changed my phone number. After convincing my worried parents, I now live in a different city. My apartment is smaller than before, but the rent is cheaper. I was enjoying my freedom. Lucas had assumed I couldn't work, but that wasn't true. Since working every day was physically demanding, I started a part-time job with an adjusted schedule. The manager was understanding about my health condition. That's tough, but I think you're doing great, Iris. Thank you, I replied, truly happy. Holding my paycheck, I felt elated. I could live on my own strength. I earned this myself. The days when I was controlled and forced to depend on Lucas were over. I had escaped the nightmare. Though I often missed work and my salary was modest, it was enough to pay rent with some leftover. With what I have now, I can survive. I've really gotten the hang of saving money. I wasn't sure if I was impressed or dismayed. In any case, I was good at saving. I would live on my own or perhaps not entirely alone. Oh, there he was again, a customer who always came at the same time. He was quiet, only saying, "Thank you" at the checkout. Yet that single word made my heart flutter. He would look at me intently, then awkwardly shift his gaze. He must like you, Iris. Really? I smiled, hoping it was true.